Well, Bennett Kessler filed this story. In many towns across the western United States, street vendors have increased in number and popularity. Now, some of that trend has come to the city of Bishop, and at a recent city council retreat meeting, Bishop Police Chief Chris Carter and council members talked about this and other issues. Now, Chief Carter said street vendors have produced, quote, emerging issues in other cities, how to regulate them, end quote. Now, Carter said he and the council talked about the pros and cons. He said the vendors do stimulate the economy and provide work for citizens, but there are also public safety issues as customers crowd around hot dog vendors set up on public streets. Now, Carter said he also updated the city council on the ongoing work of school safety. He and other law enforcement and school officials have been meeting to review procedure on school campuses and ways of making them safer. Now, all of this discussion was prompted by the mass shootings at Sandy Hook School in Newtown, Connecticut. Now, as for potential improvements at the Bishop Police Department facility, Chief Carter said in compliance with grand jury reports, he and his staff are at work on minor remodeling in the front lobby. Plans include enclosure of the lobby area at the entrance to the department for the security of officers and other staff. Well, in Yomono Public Health Officer Dr. Rick Johnson says that all indicators show that the influenza season is winding down, although not completely gone. Now, as influenza hit many states hard and finally made it to California, interest in flu vaccines was high. Dr. Johnson hopes this will prompt Eastern Sierra residents to get their flu vaccines earlier next fall. He had said that the vaccine is more than 60% effective, which cannot be said about any other flu preventative. Now, Dr. Johnson said the flu has been particularly hard on the elderly. He advises not to let your guard down and that it is still prudent to stay home when you are sick. Dr. Johnson said cover your cough, wash your hands frequently, and seek medical care if you get sick and are at higher risk for complications. Now, with spring near, Dr. Johnson reminded that hantavirus is still a potential threat. Killed 3 Yosemite visitors and sickened 6 more last summer. Now, Johnson pointed out that in December, Yosemite National Park began demolishing 91 tent cabins in Curry Village. That's a rustic encampment of 408 canvas-sided cabins jammed into a pine and cedar glade near Half Dome. It was there that an outbreak of hantavirus began last summer, infecting at least 10 people and killing 3. Now, closer to home, when you start to clean out sheds and other buildings this spring, check with your health department or online for precautions to avoid exposure to the often deadly hantavirus. Well, Bennett Kessler also filed this report. Inyo Superior Court Judge Dean Stout has officially signed a preliminary injunction, and that's to stop Deep Springs College from going co-ed pending further court action on this issue. Now, the preliminary injunction says all Deep Springs entities and officials are prohibited from soliciting or accepting applications from women and from admitting women as students at Deep Springs College. Now, this injunction came about in the legal action initiated by a majority of Deep Springs trustees to ask the court to interpret the language of the trust established by L.L. Nunn in 1923 to create Deep Springs College. Now, that trust refers to the, quote, education of promising young men, end quote. Now, most trustees reason that 90 years later, society now demands inclusion of women. Now, 2 of the trustees disagreed and challenged the court action. Last month, Judge Stout ruled that the Deep Springs Trust, quote, cannot be construed as giving the trustees discretion to admit female students, end quote. Now, the next development involves the trustees' request to legally modify the trust to allow female students. Now, until Judge Stout makes that decision, he has ruled in the injunction that Deep Springs can do nothing toward coeducational. He has forbidden them to use assets or change faculty in relation to transition to coeducation. The judge also ordered that Deep Springs post a copy of his order on the Deep Springs College internet website on the, quote, same web page on which the college has been posting updates about the co-education issue and posting certain court filings, end quote. Now, both sides have a court call with Judge Stout coming up this week on March 8th. And Joe Liebert, the attorney who represents the two trustees who oppose an interpretation of the trust to allow women in the college, said his clients are not against co-education or women. He said it's about trust law and protection of a specific purpose. Now, Dave Hitz, the chair of Deep Springs trustees, had stated that times have changed and that women now play a significant leadership role in society. He said, quote, most trustees believe that effective training must include women and men working together. We'll be back with weather and sports.